Hello and welcome to the Discover Dayton podcast, the show that's all about the Gem City's past, present, and future. Today is another politics episode, and I'm excited to talk to Democratic U.S. Senate candidate for the state of Ohio, Morgan Harper, who has an impressive resume that includes clerking for a U.S. District Court, working as a paralegal for the Federal Trade Commission, and serving as a senior advisor at the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau during the Obama administration. So join me for my conversation with her in just a moment. Well, hello and welcome to the show, and thank you so much for talking with me today.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Absolutely. Well, so we'll definitely get to some specific questions in a bit, but first, I just wondered if you could talk a little bit about yourself and why you're running and how your background has prepared you to be the next U.S. Senator for the state of Ohio.
Yeah. So, a big reason why I'm in politics at all just has to do with some of my early life experiences in Columbus. So I was born at the Ohio State University Hospital. I given up for adoption. I lived in a foster home as an infant, and then was adopted and raised by my mom, who worked in the public school system. And, I just had that exposure to what it looks like when you get that financial or life shock to your family. And I knew the reason we were able to make it through was because I had even one parent with a stable job. And then even more importantly, the strong community around us that was able to really step up and had the wherewithal to give beyond themselves. Mm-hmm. And so, that's what put me in a position to get scholarships to go to places like Princeton and Stanford Law School, worked in Washington, and really with a vision of trying to make sure everybody gets a fair shot. Like, I'm so grateful that Ohio gave me. And I saw, wow, this place that's supposed to be really delivering for us has been completely corrupted by special interests and money and careerism. And if that's going to change, we have to have different types of people running with a vision of how to change course here. And that's why I'm running for the Senate and why I'm in politics.
Awesome. Well, you mentioned careerism. And so to start off, one thing I saw on your website was that you'd like to institute term limits to have a maximum of 2 terms, I believe, for U.S.
Mm-hmm.
senators. So could you talk about why you think that's important?
Yeah, I think it's important because right now, and I don't know that this will always be the case, but where we sit in 2022, and especially in Ohio, there's a real lack of trust in our institutions and in our elected officials, especially those who go to Washington. And so I think it's important to have term limits so that I can let people know this isn't going to be about me. This is going to be about staying focused to really get things done. And because one of the most common questions I've gotten during this campaign is, why should I trust you? Why do we buy this? We've had so many people that come through and they say they're going to try to do things and then we never hear from them again. How are you different? And being able to point to, the fact that I'm grassroots, that no powerful party person tapped me on the shoulder and said that it was my turn, that I'm not taking corporate money. And then also on top of that I'm making a commitment to have a timeline of service to really maintain that focus and urgency is what I've found then allows people to believe enough to even talk about, different policies and things like that. So we've got to get over this disillusionment threshold. And I think term limits is one way to restore that trust.
Gotcha. Thank you. Well, you have a jobs plan on your website, which you call the Ohio Opportunity Guarantee. And I found it pretty interesting. And in that you talk about things like clean energy, living wage, Medicare for all, mm-hmm. and a debt-free education, just to name a few. So I'm wondering if you could talk a bit about that plan and how you believe it would create a better future for Ohioans.
Yeah, really excited about the plan. And that's the overarching vision. Like I said, everybody getting a fair shot, guaranteeing opportunity for every Ohioan, regardless of where you live or what your parents do, or if you have a lot of money. And I actually don't think it's that complicated to get there. So, some of the ideas that I have are making sure we have at the federal level incentives that are going to be building out the clean energy sector, which is a sector of the future, to create jobs all over the state and in renewable energy. And that's not just jobs, but that also will be small businesses, medium-sized businesses in that industry, and also supporting that industry as it grows. And that also, we then need to have a workforce that's prepared to work those jobs, run those businesses. So what does that look like? Debt-free training, education, including vocational, and those who choose to go to 4-year public college, to make sure that we don't have the level of student debt burden that we've seen over the last 20 years, which in many cases has been predatory, folks signing up for loans that were promising a future that was never going to happen and that won't be able to get paid off in any efficient way. And so not repeating those mistakes, but really putting younger people and adults in a strong position to be able to have the training, but then still also have enough financial resources to invest in themselves and having families. Another thing, what it takes to be in a strong position as an individual is being healthy. And I support Medicare for all, because our current system where healthcare is dependent on your employer, we saw during the pandemic just how unrealistic and not sustainable it is to have this setup, that we really need to make sure that regardless of your income level, what your employment situation is, that you're able to access the healthcare you need. And that involves leveraging the power at the federal level to check big insurance, big pharma companies that really are just making it up as they go along and charging us a lot more than you end up getting charged for the same care and treatment in other countries. So Medicare for all is a way to get around that. And then the only other thing I would mention, though, there's a lot more detail on the site, is there's some larger issues in the economy that have made it so that we are seeing this concentration of power and resources among a very small few number of companies, people, individuals, and then everyone else kind of just scrambling to try to get by. And that, to me, that concentration issue needs to be addressed through better antitrust enforcement. And refreshing some of our antitrust laws. And so that's another priority. And that's that needs to happen at the level of government, the federal level, in order to create a truly free market where everybody's earning enough to be okay.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, so we're recording this on April 19th, one day before April 20th or 420. So I have to ask you, of course, what your position is on legalizing marijuana at the federal level, which I believe you're in support of. But can you talk about how that should be done and why you support legalization?
Yeah, strong supporter of this, have been for my few years of political career. It just makes sense. I mean, a lot of the positions I have, it's just coming from a place of what makes the most sense, and also is reflecting where most people in our state are at. And on this issue in particular, I mean, it's a no-brainer, right? We shouldn't be criminalizing cannabis, weed, whatever you want to call it, especially now when we have folks who are making money off of it. So I think we need to legalize it, and then also make sure that we are addressing folks who have been put away and received prison sentences related to marijuana, and make sure that as we're creating more economic opportunity in that space, in that market area, that it is reaching people who have been disproportionately impacted by bad federal policy on this front. So it's the right thing to do. It makes economic sense. And like I said, I think most people are on that side of the issue at this point, including a lot of people who identify as conservative. So we just need to get it done.
I'm always surprised John Boehner became a weed lobbyist. So
well, right. Funny, once you start making money off things, you become more open-minded. Isn't that cute?
It is true. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, so obviously women's right to an abortion is under attack, not just in Ohio, but nationally. And the Supreme Court seems like at a minimum, they'll probably chip away at the constitutional protections that women have, thanks to Roe v. Wade. So I'm wondering, could you talk about your take on what needs to happen to ensure women's reproductive rights remain intact?
Yeah, so scary where we're at, and a lot of the GOP efforts. And look, I am a Democrat, but I am very open to talking and working with a lot of different types of people. But we got to call a spade here. And right now, our state GOP is really focused on stripping away rights and freedoms, even though they claim to be about wanting to protect freedom. And this one in particular, abortion access, I mean, we're at a really vulnerable point. And so what I think we need to do at the federal level, codify Roe v. Wade into law. We need to get rid of the filibuster in order to do that. But one step further is we also need to be honest about the fact that the Supreme Court has been radicalized. A branch of our government, is now not really legitimate. And, we're seeing this every day in different ways, with Clarence Thomas and his wife and what they're doing to spread the big lie, but then also some of the confirmations that were pushed through and justices that are going to be on the side of stripping away this right. We need to recalibrate that institution. So that's where I say, we need to expand the Supreme Court. It's one of the distinctions between me and my primary opponent, Congressman Ryan. And again, it's coming from a place of being honest about where we are and what it'll take to make sure that we protect people's access to abortion for the next generation.
Well, that was going to be my next question, so you already answered it. So thank you. Well, right now across the country, we're seeing workers at places like Starbucks and Amazon even winning union victories for the first time ever at some of those places. So you support the Protect the Right to Organize Act, or the PRO Act. So could you explain maybe what that is and why you believe it's needed?
Yeah, so the PRO Act, and this is also part of the Opportunity Guarantee Plan, is working to protect workers' ability to unionize. And that's something that also has been under attack over the last 40 years by conservatives in government at the federal level. So, just making sure that we have strong protections there. And that's at the root of making sure that we have, again, a truly free market. A free market means that, yes, businesses are able to get created and grow and be profitable, but then also that we have workers who are capturing their fair share of that growth. And right now, that isn't what's happening. So that's where unions and having strong collective bargaining rights are going to be important to realize that vision. And so, yeah, in support of that, we're in a historic moment that is really exciting to see the level of organizing that's happening. As you mentioned, in Starbucks, but then also sometimes less publicly reported, but there have been movements that are happening in Kellogg factory and John Deere, and the Amazon warehouse also getting a lot of attention, but it's everywhere, and a lot of student workers. And today I'm going to be stopping by Kenyon College, where student workers are organizing around better wages, and also folks who are working as graduate students who also help to run the university. That's happening at Ohio State. So it's exciting and it's long overdue. And so having measures at the federal level like the PRO Act is going to continue to protect our rights to organize in the workplace. And that's really important.
Absolutely. Well, so you take a strong stand on issues like racial justice and LGBTQ plus rights, at least from what I've seen, in your campaign. So I'm wondering if you could talk a bit about what you believe needs to be done at the federal level within those areas.
Yeah, well, I'll take the second issue first.
Okay.
So on LGBTQ plus rights, I believe that we need to pass the Equality Act. And I would be, a strong proponent of that to prevent any discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation or identity. And long overdue. And that, that is another distinguishing point between me and my opponent, kind of slower to come around on the importance of pushing for that legislation. But we're seeing, especially in places like Ohio, where we have a state legislature that is doing things like introducing HB 616, the Don't Say Gay bill, other efforts that are attacking transgender people and youth, that we really need to have federal protections in place to fight back on that front. And so, really focused on that. And then on the racial justice front, there's so many things, and, we have more detail on this on the website. We need to recognize, and I want to be focused on doing what we can to close the wealth gap. Data shows, there is this gap between the level of wealth when you compare white families, Black families in the US. And so that's one of the reasons why, I support things like pursuing systemic reparations at the federal level, because there have been federal policies that have prevented wealth building, like FHA, making mortgages available, making some benefits from the GI Bill available to Black vets in the same way. So all of these things have a historic basis for pursuing policies that are going to do something to remedy those wrongs. And then, and we're looking at some of the other policies we've already talked about. I actually see as fitting into a racial justice agenda. Take something like student debt cancellation. I guess we didn't talk about that specifically, but just talking about the debt issue. One of the populations most impacted by student debt crisis is Black women. And so that would be, an economic boon for the Black community to free from this burden, and then open up more opportunities for entrepreneurship and being able to, invest in having families. And then, the other thing I would say, Medicare for all, a universal policy as constructed. But right now there are barriers to who is able to take risks in starting businesses, or, being able to maybe removed from the workplace to take care of a kid, to then allow a partner to be able to pursue a different job opportunity. And so having a universal healthcare system will level the playing field in that way, especially for Black community, where we are less likely to have that generational wealth that might then be the seed capital to buy a home or start a business. That it's really important that you're able to also take risks in the same way. So Medicare for All would help with that. And then finally, I would just mention, an issue that comes up a lot in the Black community, or has during this campaign, are violence and gun violence in different parts of the state, all over the state, really. And so that's why, I'm a strong proponent of gun safety legislation at the federal level, but then getting at the root causes of violence and making sure that we're investing in people having economic opportunity that's going to make our community strong and help to fend off some of the gun violence is really important as well.
Absolutely. Well, going a bit overseas now, I guess, the United States is currently providing the state of Israel billions of dollars every year, despite the fact Amnesty International and many others have labeled Israel as an apartheid state. So can you talk about what you believe the U.S. stance towards Israel should be, and what changes you would make, if any, to our current policy within the Israeli-Palestinian conflict?
Yeah. Well, I think we need to be focused on doing what we can to protect everyone in the region and respecting the human rights of Palestinians, of Israeli, in our efforts to do that. And as a country, as we move forward into this next phase, I mean, I'm almost 40 years old. 9/11 happened my second week of college, and then we started a lot of these wars that were endless and based on false information. And I think it has informed how I individually, how our generation is thinking about what our foreign policy and military engagements in particular look like moving forward. And so I would have the approach of assessing, okay, what are we spending on? What are we getting from it? How does this fit into our priorities as a country? How are we balancing these investments with investments that we're making at home? And that would include looking at some of our spending in Israel as well. But there are other places too that I think we need to kind of get a refresh of what are we investing in and why, and do we all agree that this aligns with our values and priorities? So that would be my approach. But I'm also pretty humble that as one individual senator, it's a very complicated issue that hasn't been solved for a long time. And I don't know that I can commit to, I'm going to be the one to fully figure it out, but I am going to be very, very focused on doing what I can to try.
Thank you. Well, getting back closer to home, one issue you talk about that I don't typically see many politicians bring up is the burden of property taxes, and particularly on the elderly population. So can you explain why that's an important issue to you and what you'd like to change?
Yeah, there's so many policies that we have that just don't make any sense. And it's funny, just yesterday I was in Dayton and talking to this retiree, an older woman, and she was telling me about how she doesn't understand why her Medicare is so expensive. She's on a fixed income. She doesn't understand why she was forced to take out this annuity that she had. She's a retired educator because otherwise she was going to get taxed 50%. And then, she didn't mention this, but what you just brought up, and that we also have seniors that maybe are in a position of losing their homes because they can't keep up with property taxes, though all research shows, if you're able to age in place near the community that you've known, that's a better outcome for you, as you get older, for all of us, which, with any luck, we all will become older. Right. And so, yeah, I'm all about, again, just trying to let's do what makes sense, and let's not punish people for living. Right. And put the burden always on regular people to have to manage all these expenses. The tax rate, yesterday was tax day. Why are we paying more effectively in taxes than billionaires? This doesn't make any sense. Why do we have a system that sides with those who are ultra wealthy rather than making things more manageable for us? And so on property taxes, yeah, I think that's one where we really need to be revisiting whether we have people at that stage of life who are paying property taxes, and consider how we might be able to ease some of their burdens as they age and are on fixed incomes. Because what I don't want to see is what has occurred, which, we have families, and this connects to the racial wealth gap issue as well, who are losing those assets because they're not able to manage those expenses as the property values are starting to rise, in particular in formerly redline communities. So let's just dig in. Let's figure it out. Let's make things make sense. And let's make it a little easier for us to all be okay.
Yeah, absolutely. So you worked for, you were a senior advisor at the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau during the Obama administration. I wonder if you could talk about what that experience was like and what that organization does for individuals in the United States and Ohio, obviously.
Yeah, so the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau was started after the financial foreclosure crisis about 10 or so years ago. And part of the reason why a lot of people believe that crisis happened is because regulators were asleep at the wheel. The jurisdiction for regulating the mortgage industry was spread throughout all these different agencies and lots of consumer products. And so no one really felt ultimate responsibility to be looking out for consumers. And so let's create an agency where you're consolidating a lot of that authority and oversight and regulation, because consumers are more vulnerable than just your average corporation. And so we need to make sure that the financial products that are being offered are really on the side of doing what's right and not exploiting or having predatory behavior there. So that's why CFPB was created. I was there for almost 4 years and working on issues around the mortgage industry, consumer credit reporting, prepaid cards, involved in regulating that market for the first time. And what it showed me is, one, that the government can really work for people, right? I mean, especially in our state, I think there are a lot of people with a healthy level of disdain for the federal government or not feeling like it's always the best use of resources. But CFPB showed me firsthand that, look, we got, $12 billion back to 28 million consumers in just a few years, data-driven decision-making, and a lot of people that were moving with urgency, which I think is, like we were talking about the term limits thing, just so important, because that's what all of us are moving with, right? If you're trying to make it through every day, it's an urgent activity. And so we need people who are in government that are matching that level of effort and hustle to make sure that we're okay. And that's what CFPB was about. So, the other thing though, is I did observe its limitations as well. And, that's one of the things that then led me to move towards politics. Is we did great work and I think really impactful work to make these consumer financial product markets work better. Another example would be exposing just how predatory overdraft fees can be. Well, that rulemaking didn't end up getting finalized, but look, this year you see big banks that are announcing they're just not going to charge overdraft fees anymore because the court of public opinion has judged them, right? So anyway, but then every time I'm coming back to Ohio, I'm like, well, that was great work, but people are still slipping further behind. So there's some deeper issues going on here in our economy that are making it harder for people to be okay. And I think that connects to both our politics and the types of policies that we're pushing. And we need, some more transformative action here to really get to that opportunity guarantee.
Sure. Well, one of the first ways I came across your campaign was actually on TikTok. And
love TikTok.
I do too. Which someone wanted me to ask you if you have a favorite TikTok creator.
Oh my gosh. I don't know. Can I say I love our TikTok.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I'm still, well, what's funny is it's just been a really cool way to discover real people who have this platform and are talking about politics in some ways in a better way than the professional media people do. There was one guy, I'm forgetting his handle now or his name, but he just started posting. I think he's a vet, and he just started posting, like, you need to be paying attention to Morgan Harper. He's just in his car, like, this is crazy that this Josh Mandel guy is even out here, and do what you can to support this person. And, that stuff really gives me life, because a lot of times, you're out here, you're trying to talk to so many people, you try to get the message out, and you wonder, is anything breaking through? And then you have this person you've never met who's willing to use their platform, boost what's going on. It's really cool. So I've become a big TikTok fan. It is a little bit scary though, because a lot of time can go by very quickly unexpectedly on TikTok. So I try to, regulate myself there, but no, it's been pretty awesome to just see the level of support we've gotten on the platform.
Yeah, no, it's great, but you are definitely right. I can waste quite a bit of time there, but well, in the I think one of the first TikToks I saw though of you, it was a debate you had with Republican Senate candidate Josh Mandel, and in it you were looking to put an end to career politicians or you said you were looking to put an end to career politicians who are, bought and sold to corporate interests. And you included not only Josh Mandel in that list, but also your primary opponent, Tim Ryan. So could you talk about that more and explain why you believe you're the best candidate, in the primary, but also in the general election in that regard?
Yeah. Well, when I'm talking to a lot of people throughout Ohio and especially politicos, there's a lot of attention on, the Obama to Trump voters and rural areas and all of that. But that's been interesting in this campaign is how consistent what those audiences are saying to what, you hear from people in the cities and Black working class voters and women is they're even more traditional Dem primary voters who are maybe more affluent. There's this feeling of exhaustion with what politics has been over the last 20 years. And then also what has happened to our communities over the last 20 years. And I've said, we can't have another 20 like the last 20. And with both Josh Mandel, who, though he wants to present himself as something different, is a career politician and has been running for office for 20 years. And then Tim Ryan, who has been in Congress for 20 years, that's the past. And what's our future looking like? And I'm presenting an option to the people of Ohio that is future oriented, that I'm in this with you. I'm almost 40. I hopefully have another 40 years to go. And let's sketch this out together. I've got a vision for some policies that'll help us get to that place of everybody getting a fair shot. I don't think it's that complicated, but it starts with the right leadership that is focused on delivering solutions quickly, leadership that is not bought out to special interests and corporate money, which both of the folks I just mentioned are. And we can do this. And I had the experience of having been in Washington, but I'm pairing that with a real understanding of having worked on the ground and knowing what it's going to take for us to galvanize and come together and get it done.
Awesome. Well, second to last question for you. You are the co-founder of Columbus Stand Up, which is a grassroots community organization that worked, in relation to helping with the effects of the pandemic. So I wonder if you could talk a little bit about what that organization did specifically and what they were responsible for.
Yeah, we started Columbus Stand Up after, because I previously had run for office a couple of years ago, and really just, I'm mentioning the same thing again, just because it comes up so often, the lack of trust. And I heard that from people a lot of, oh, well, politicians come and then they leave when they don't need votes anymore. And I really wanted to show people a different model for what politics could be. And so wanting to start an organization to keep up that engagement and really service, that it's not just transactional, asking you for something, that we can also serve you, Mm-hmm. And so in 2020, biggest need in the community for sure was pandemic relief. We had homeless shelters that weren't getting any PPE, elderly folks that were stuck at home without access to transportation. And so we formed some partnerships with national nonprofits to get 30,000 masks throughout Franklin County. We started a rideshare program, with our volunteers and some community partners to get people to the polls to vote, and then also to their vaccine appointments as we moved into 2021. And that was, to me, just a really great demonstration of, we know what we need. And when we come together, we can get it done. And so now what we need is government to catch up with all the work that we're doing right now, to make sure that we have people in a more stable position. And so I'm really optimistic about our ability to use government in that way. And again, it just starts with the right leadership. And I hope to get everyone's support, to get there. May 3rd, vote, please.
Well, and along those lines, if people would like to learn more about your candidacy, what are some of the best ways for people to find you?
Well, of course, TikTok, MH for OH, but that's also our handle for all social platforms, MH, the number 4 OH, MH for OH. And then our website is morganharper.org. Reach out, DM me. I mean, that's how we connected, I think. So I'm always checking messages and all that. And if people have any questions, or if they want to get involved, we are looking for volunteers, boost things on social, all of it. Would love to be in touch. And that's the way we're going to do this. We, don't have the same level of financial resources as some of my opponents, but we have the message, we have the people. And so we just need to make sure everybody knows that we're out here.
Absolutely. Well, I know how busy you must be. So I want to be respectful of your time, but I just want to say thank you so much for talking with me today. I really appreciate it.
No, thanks for having me. Look forward to continuing to be in touch.
Absolutely. All right. That was my interview with U.S. Senate candidate Morgan Harper, and I really appreciate her taking the time to talk with me today. Don't forget, that next week is the primary election, which happens Tuesday, May 3rd, so be sure to get out and exercise your right to vote. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with a friend. You can also visit our website at discoverdaytonpodcast.com to get some merch or submit a guest request. Thanks so much for listening, and stay funky, Dayton.